Hello all, welcome back to my CISSP exam review series, and today we're going to discuss about the part 3 of domain 1, which is called as a security and risk management. In the previous series we have discussed about canons, policy, procedures, GRC, CIA and all that. So I will try my best to cover rest of the content in this particular series. My name is Prab Nair. For more information you can refer my LinkedIn profile. Thank you. So in this particular series, the first part of this particular section we have called contribute to and enforce personal security policy and procedure. Now this particular part is basically deal with the candidates who basically join the organization, and we need to manage the security from the candidate's point of view. Example, we used to say that in CISSP and normal in the information security, human is considered as one of the weakest link of an organization. Okay, no matter you have a hi-fi technologies, hi-fi security, best encryption, best security product, but one small mistake done by the human can bring the organization in trouble. You heard about a lot of security breach heard in 2020, SANS and other vendors, where you have seen the human is basically the biggest factor in that security breach. So that is why in CISSP also we give bit attention to that particular element also, which called as a security policy for the people. Now in this particular section, we basically going to discuss about the first part, which is called as a candidate screening and hiring. Now when you're talking about the candidate screening and hiring, see, normally people believe that, okay, this is considered as a detective control, but candidate screening and hiring mean that, before hiring any candidate, we do the due care and due diligence check of the candidate to make sure we are hiring a right set of candidate or right candidate for this particular position. So make sure the HR team basically doing the practice right, making their practice more useful and effective to make sure they're hiring a right set of candidate, because actual threat we can mitigate from the hiring itself. If you basically hire a wrong candidate for the wrong position in the organization, then what happen, it can be create a big trouble for the organization. So that is why hiring a right set of candidate for the position is basically reduce the impact of any kind of a risk. But question is, how can we basically address that? So normally what happen, we have a reporting manager. Example, I am a reporting manager which is working on the information security. I will basically share the JD. The JD is basically job description will basically go to the HR business partner. They will basically sign and then they will circulate in the market. We have an access management team, which basically give the access to the candidate based on the job practice only, which is called as a principle of least privilege and need to know. So that is why a strong job practice is required, which should be cover the necessary skills which candidate need to perform in the organization. So by doing a screening and hiring, we basically preventing a threat, not detecting a threat, to make sure right set of candidates is joining the organization. The second part is basically called as a employment agreements and policy. That is another important thing we have. Make sure he should sign all kind of an agreement. Whenever any employee join the organization, he need to sign the NDA, non-disclosure agreement. That is also applicable post termination. Along with that, he has to sign the AUP policy, which is called about do and don'ts. Okay, you basically do this or you don't do this, this kind of a practices, whatever we have. So you need to abide with that. So you need to sign that, which is called as a AUP policy. What need to be included in the AUP policy, when need to sign this AUP policy, and during an employment agreement policy, he has not signed the AUP or NDA. It's the biggest concern for a security consultant. So this kind of a question can be framed in the exam value, basically writing this. So what are the biggest concern here is, if employee has not signed this agreement and we have given them access to the facility. Even when you basically initiate any kind of a VAPT with the third party vendors and all that, before even sharing any kind of a scoping and all that, we basically request them to sign the NDA. Now what is NDA? Is non-disclosure agreement, which ensure that, okay, they are not supposed to disclose our information with others. And if they basically do this thing, so we have a complete right to take action against those particular companies. Same applicable for the employees and a freelance consultant. So make sure they should sign the agreement policies and all that. That is basically part need to be reviewed. Another important thing is basically called as a onboarding and termination. So we have a two type of termination. Okay, one is basically called as a friendly termination, and one is basically called as a non-friendly termination. Friendly termination when you basically resign, and non-friendly termination when company tell you to ask to leave. In both cases, make sure the first step is notify the department, notify all. And one other department which is called IAM, they are the one who basically going to revoke the access. Make sure from the exam point of view, the best practice is revoke the access. But if the question talking about what is the first step, immediately notify all the department. Okay, so during a termination, we need to make sure that, and during a termination, there is on a last day, we have to make sure he has written all the assets, and that is also become the exam question. That what is the biggest concern for a security consultant associated with the terminated employee? If his access still there in the system, that is a concern. And second biggest concern is basically he has not returned his assets back. So during a HR exit feedbacks and all that, make sure we review his responsibility toward the organization, make them aware about their responsibility after leaving the organization, make them aware about their NDA clauses, whatever he signed, and make sure on the last day we will return his assets, and with the help of one candidate, one employee, make them exit to the organization. So these kind of practices need to be considered, and make sure they're doing that. It is a role of a CISSP. The third part is called as a vendor consultant and contractor agreements and control. So vendor consultant and contractors agreement control, this is basically applicable in that case when we basically hire a candidate, or when we basically hire the services from the third party. So in all three cases, make sure we review the governance. That is the most important thing, how you basically verify and review the governance with the help of contract. Okay, make sure whatever the terminations, whatever the clauses we have, that need to be agreed in the SLA. Make sure in the SLA right to audit clause must be there. So in that case, a customer basically send their auditor to the provider. Okay, or they can basically agreed with one company who will do the audit for the provider on behalf of the customer. But that clause must be there in the SLA, which is called as a right to audit clause. So right to audit clause play a very important role by which we can assess the governance of the target organization. When I say assess the governance of an organization, we just need to understand how they basically handle all the requests, how they basically handle the customer management and all that. So during a vendor consultant and contractor agreement control, we basically check all those factors. The next part is basically called as a company compliance policy requirement. We already discussed in my previous slides. Compliance policy mean you need to comply with some policies, and you need to make sure the people should also compliance with those policy. How to achieve that? When we basically make them join the organization, he should sign the policy. Signing the policy is giving the acknowledgement that he understood the policy. That is a one thing. On a regular basis, do the checks by awareness workshops and all that. We can make sure that okay, they are compliance with those requirements. Because if they are following that, it doesn't mean they are actually following that. So writing it does not mean happens. Go look and verify. Okay, so if the policy say that you're not supposed to share your username and password with others, we can do some kind of a drill exercise and assess the candidate based on all those conditions and see how they basically respond to that particular situation. So all those things is basically part of the compliance policy. Make sure we should not breach the employee privacy and all that. In some companies, what happened, they basically monitor the Gmail data, net banking data and all that. We configure the proxy in such a manner by which we can able to intercept the HTTP proxies and all that, HTTPS proxy. So before installing any kind of a security monitoring control in the organization, remember always consult the legal advisor. Legal advisor. It is very important for you to consult the legal advisor before configuring any solutions. You should not be in any kind of a trouble where you introducing some kind of a solution which can breach someone's privacy. So any kind of a security monitoring you are doing on the employees and all that, make sure you should be comply with the privacy policies. Live example, this year we in 2020 we faced that the GDPR penalty has been enforced on one company. I forget the name of the company. It was basically into retail and all that. Okay, H&M, yeah. So it was a privacy monitoring only. So make sure if you are complying with any kind of a GDPR and other privacy parameters and all that, we have to check the existing regulation, what they talk about, how can we do the monitoring of employees, and according to that, introduce such kind of a solutions. Small advice I would like to suggest here is there is a difference between the surveillance and spy. When you're doing a surveillance and monitoring, you're notifying them before doing that. And spying is basically something without notifying, you're basically monitoring their activities. Next part is basically called as a risk management, one of the turning point of a CISSP. Those who are preparing for CISSP, make sure you should have a good understanding of a risk management. A small advice, your most of the questions are testable based on the risk management only. They start from a domain 4, they start from a domain 5, they start from a domain 7, the question, but end with a risk management. John is a security consultant who want to implement some kind of a DLP. Okay, he's in a process of procuring a DLP. What is the first step? Doing a risk assessment of the organization strategy. Ram is basically in a process of building a policy. What is the first thing he need to identify is the risk. So he has to conduct a risk assessment. So risk management is a driving factor for any organization. So when you're talking about the risk management, under the risk management, the first step is basically called as a risk identification. The second step is basically called as a risk analysis. And third step is basically called as a risk treatment. When I say risk identification and risk analysis, it is also called as a risk assessment. Risk treatment is whatever the risk we have identified, we need to respond to the risk. So we have a 4 options here, which is called as a MATA. Mitigate the risk, transfer the risk, accept the risk, and avoid the risk. Okay, so we have a 4 way to treat the risk. Ultimate goal of a risk management is to mitigate the risk to an acceptable level. That is the one thing. And bring the risk as low as possible. Okay, bring the residual risk as low as possible. And then start monitoring the residual risk. Make sure it should not exceed the appetite level. So that is why we have a step-by-step process in the risk management. If we take an example here, the first step is basically identify threats and vulnerability, but against what? The first step here, which is missed here, which is called as identifying assets. That is the first important thing that you have to do, identify assets. For that, what you need an inventory management, in which you basically get a value of the assets and you also get information about the owner. We have a 2 type of value. One is called as a qualitative and one is basically called as a quantitative. I'm not talking about the qualitative analysis, qualitative risk analysis or quantitative risk analysis. I'm talking about the overall value of an asset, which basically generated by the asset for the organization. If I say my laptop is basically generating a business of every month $10,000. Okay, so that is basically my quantitative, but it also led with my reputation, which cannot be measured. So whenever we basically identifying assets, we can basically validate with the help of asset management, inventory of assets, where we basically get the updated inventory assets with their asset values. Then on that particular asset, we identify threats and vulnerability. People always get confused between threats and vulnerability. How to remember? Threat is an action. Always remember. And vulnerability is called as the absence of control. If I say we have a system does not have a password, that is basically the control. That is a vulnerability. There is no password. And human is there internally. He tried to hack into the system based on that particular vulnerability. Okay. So here we have a absence of password, that is a vulnerability, and employees there who basically use their opportunity and gain access to the system. And what is a risk? Risk is basically all about disclosure of a data. Risk is always deal with the compromisation of a CIA. So once we basically get a visibility about what are the threats and what are the vulnerabilities we have, the second step is basically called as a risk assessment and analysis, where we basically analyze the probability of that particular risk. Okay, earthquake is basically occur, how many time it occur, and what is the overall impact we have, that we need to measure. So we basically assess the likelihood and impact. We know the possibility of the earthquake is high and impact is also high. So we basically calculate the overall impact. Okay, we identify earthquake, we identify there is no BCP. Now we also trying to understand how many times earthquake is basically occur if there is no BCP. And we now trying to calculate the overall impact. Impact is also calculated by 2 ways, qualitative risk and quantitative risk. So we have a 2 way to analyze the impact. Actually, we're doing a risk management or risk assessment to reduce the impact only, because we can't control the likelihood. Okay, there is an earthquake need to be occur in Japan. In order to reduce the impact, we move the facility from Japan to India, but we can't stop the earthquake in India also, in Japan also. We just need a mental plan. We just need a mental plan. We just need some kind of a technical plan and operational plan to reduce the impact if it's occur. So that is why in the risk assessment analysis, whatever the probability of occurrence or probability or likelihood of occurrence with the impact is there, we need to reduce that. And when you want to reduce or respond to the event, we have a 4-way to respond to that particular risk. One is basically called as a accept the risk, transfer the risk, mitigate the risk, and avoid the risk. We basically accept the risk in that case when the risk is an opportunity for me. Example like if I give you this offer, free CISSP training with second shot free. So definitely once you enroll in my training program, you will basically attempt first by next week itself to just to understand how the exam it is. Okay, so you accepted the risk there. Transfer the risk, you transfer the risk to third party to manage that. We transfer the risk in that case when the probability is low but impact is high. We know earthquake is need to be occur every year or in every 5 year. But according to that every year, I don't want to consider any kind of a recurring cost. So I basically did the insurance and I understood, okay, tomorrow any earthquake happens, we have an insurance amount by which we can able to reduce the impact. So in that case, we go for the transferation of the risk. But in the transfer also, you're just transferring the risk to someone else to manage that. Ultimately, you are the one who going to own that. Mitigate the risk by implementing a control, avoiding a risk because the cost of the particular control is higher than the cost of risk. You will not going for the 40,000 CISSP training to opt for second shot. Even by the 10 shots, you can able to compete in $10,000 to $12,000. So in that case, what happen is you avoid the risk which bring risk to the organization. One more example I can give you about the risk avoidance is basically I'm scared of traveling in a public transport. Okay, so it is something I avoid the complete source of threat which can basically kill me or basically met with the accident. So I avoid the complete source of that risk, some complete source of an opportunity which bring risk to my life by avoiding a public transport in the case of COVID-19. So that kind of things we have in the risk response. The next part is basically called as a countermeasures and selection of a control. Definitely after identifying the risk and all that, we need to understand the controls parameter and all. So we have a 3 type of controls, which is basically called as a physical control. And then we have a operational control. And one is basically called as a, physical control, administrative control, and technical control. The control that you configure physical in nature, that is a physical control, like guards, physical door, physical lock. Administrative control, you're introducing some in a form of some kind of a guideline. You are not supposed to bring your family. So it is not something implemented. It was something a notification given from the management, which is a part of the administrative activity. Technical control is something you implement technical in nature. Firewall going to inspect the packet and based on that it will block. There's no human is involved who basically scan and block. So tool is involved as a technical function who try to block that. So we have a 3 type of controls and we have a 7 category. 7 categories are corrective control. The first is called as a deterrence. Second is basically called as a preventive. Third is called as a compensatory. Then we have a detective, then we have a corrective, then we have a recovery. Probably 6. Yeah, one more is called as a directive control. I can give you one live example of a COVID. Ministry has decided and notified to all the citizens you're not supposed to go outside during a COVID-19. Okay, but the message is basically include also one element. If we found you outside without any reason, we can send you on a jail for the 12 days of period. So that message is there to discourage you. Okay, and still the government has taken the preventative action by appointing some kind of officers on the road. Okay, they also appointed some kind of a scanners, but still there was a scanners which able to detect your COVID symptoms. Immediately a corrective action has been taken, isolate you from the family, and then it is basically sent to you for 14 days of quarantine period. If you can see thin line difference between the corrective and recovery, corrective is basically temporary and recovery is a permanent. System was identified with the virus, isolate a system, that is a corrective. Removing a system, removing a virus from the system, restore back to the production, that is a recovery. Make sure we follow the BIA parameter before going for the recovery. Now you can implement these 7 categories with 3 types. How? Physical directive, technical directive, or administrative directives. Okay, I would recommend you to refer the CBK 4th edition. They have given a very good tabular picture where they have explained about this control types and category. Next part is called as a security control assessment. Once we implement the control, we need to assess the control. Why? To see the effectiveness. Any question in the exam talking about what is the goal of an assessment, what is the goal of a VAPT, always remember it is used for the control effectiveness. See, control is working, that is there, but it is working effectively, that we need to assess. Example, firewall basically has a controls which basically say that any traffic which is coming from outside will not able to access the web server on port number 123. We try to assess that particular rule by sending some kind of a malform packets. Why? Because I want to see the effectiveness of the firewall rule. That is why we're doing a control assessment. Okay, security control assessment is very important for the CISSP exam preparation. Make sure you should follow their processes which is mentioned in the security control assessment. The next part is basically monitoring. Definitely after identifying the risk and we did the assessment to make sure control is working effectively, we do the regular monitoring. And we also reevaluate the asset valuation. On a regular basis, report to the concerned party. We do this activity in a proper manner. And if you want to go for a risk management, we can also follow some kind of risk framework. You can refer NIST 837 for more better visibility. It will, my suggestion that, okay, before going for the CISSP exam, just have a high level overview of the risk framework of NIST from the NIST booklet. Okay, which talking about the step-by-step process. So next part is basically called as a understand and apply the threat modeling. Very, very important. See, when you're talking about the threat modeling, scenario analysis of a threat is basically called as a threat modeling. In which stage we basically perform this? This is basically performed in the design stage. What you need to remember from the exam point of view, STRIDE full form. Definitely. STRIDE is something which is very important for the exam. Even you preparing for CCSP, it is quite testable. S basically stand for spoofing, T is basically stand for tampering, R is basically stand for repudiation, I is basically stand for information disclosure, D stand for denial of services, and E stand for elevation of a privilege. So it is very important for you to understand the STRIDE. Let me give you a live example. We are in a process of design stage where we basically design the entire application on a paper. After functional requirement, we design the entire application on a paper. We have a customer here who wish to access the website. So he basically using a HTTP. Definitely HTTP has a several concerns. Spoofing is possible. During a transit, tampering is possible. Someone can claim the token, resend that, repudiation is possible. Okay, information disclosure is possible. If they have a standalone server, the DOS attack is possible. If it's running with the basic user privilege, anyone can gain access, and by which he can gain access to the root user privilege. So all those things is possible, and we design this entire application on a paper. Okay, so this basically process called as a STRIDE: spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of services, and elevation of privilege. These kind of activity we basically perform in the design stage. That is why we called as a definition of a threat modeling is scenario analysis of the possible threats that we basically perform in the design stage. So if any question has a keyword called use cases, scenario analysis of a possible threat exploit by using some kind of a use cases and all that, answer is threat modeling. So STRIDE is there, pasta is there, which is called as a pasta is not a eating pasta. You will definitely hungry during exam. Process of analysis and simulation techniques and attacks. We also have a dread here. Dread is also there. Once you basically identify the threats, you need to identify the possible way of damage and all that. So that is basically covered in the dread ratings. I would recommend you to just focus on the STRIDE. That is quite testable. Another important thing is basically called as a risk-based management concept of supply chain. Now, I would recommend you one thing. This particular topic, okay, always merge with domain 8, software quality assurance. Okay, it can be asked in the exam, or it can be validated with the help of concept of how to basically procure the applications from the market, from the vendor. So during that time, we basically do the risk assessment of a supply chain. I have seen couple of blogs where the student has, or the participant has expressed their concern about something like a COTS was there, kind of things was there. So understanding of a COTS, which is called as a commercial off the shelf software, it means procuring the application from the vendor. But before that, we have to do the risk assessment of the vendor. Now, this is the vendor who basically offer me some kind of an application, and this vendor is basically connected with another vendor. Okay, so we already conducted the risk assessment for this vendor. Now, parallel to that, we need to conduct the assessment of the entire supply chain to make sure he is fully compliant with my requirement. So how to conduct the risk assessment in the case of supply chain? How to discover the risk associated with the hardware, software, and services that we need to understand. Along with that, it is also very important if you procuring any kind of a services or outsourcing your services, how they basically do the monitoring, that is important. Whenever you basically diving by the contract and all that, we are expecting a minimum security requirement in that, because contract is the only factor we have by which we can able to establish and offset the risk. In the case of courts and all that, you don't have access to the code. Only with the help of SLA, you can basically offset the risk. So we have a three important term. One is called as a SLA, service level agreement. But before that, there is a called as a SLR, service level requirement. Service level requirement basically shared by the customer to the vendor. And vendor is basically share to the customer, this is something I agreed, which is called SLA. Then customer will sign the SLA, and based on the SLA, they basically work their activities. Fail to abide with the SLA, customer has a right to ask the money, right to ask the compensation from the vendor. And that is basically the base advantage for the vendor. According to that, he basically conceptualize the services. Most important thing in the SLA, service level need to be documented, and right to audit need to be documented. Okay, so these are the key activities we have that need to be reviewed. One more thing is SLA need to be reviewed annually, or in the case of business change, environment change, or regulatory change. But OLA, there is another called as operational level agreement, which is an internal agreement that need to be reviewed in a weekly meetings. Another concept we basically called as a establish, maintain security awareness, education, and training. Three things are there. See, policy basically dictates what need to be done, but training, education, and awareness basically tell us or guide us how to follow policy. Awareness is basically a short term. Training is basically a mid-term, or education is basically long-term. Example like we should follow 8-character password. We should create 8-character password. That is an awareness. The awareness is something which modify our behavior. I was in an impression 8-character password is secure, so I was using a 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. Now I basically had awareness. 8-character password doesn't mean okay you have to use only alphabet or number. You can use the combination of alpha, numeric, and special character. So that is why we're talking about here awareness, which basically used to modify the behavior. Training you are doing right now, CISSP CISSP, which is an annual training programs, which become your education program, CPE. So training, awareness basically modify your behavior. Training is basically modify your skill. Like I'm doing CISSP to upgrade my professional skills. Then I will go for cloud that upgrade my skills. So training is basically modify your skill, and education is modify your career. So when we so far we have built all the end-to-end governance functions and all that, but most important is we need to train our employees how to follow those governance practices and everything, and that is basically driven through awareness programs and all that. But the question is how you basically measure the program awareness of the candidates who attended that awareness program last week. Example, so we can able to measure the effectiveness of the training awareness by measuring the number of incidents which has been reported. 2 weeks back, the number of incident was reported is 20 only, but now it was 40. It means people are more aware about the activity. So this is how you basically measure the program effectiveness. It is very important to regularly review all the program effectiveness also by sending a phishing campaign, mock drills, and all that. So this is all from my side. Summary is very simple. Risk management is very important. Control type and category very important. Threat modeling is very important. BCP is very important. Canons are very important. Understanding of a policy, procedure, guideline is very important, and good understanding of a CI is required. This is all from my side. My name is Prabh Nair, and for more information, do subscribe my YouTube channel. Thank you.